Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond with your host, Robin Hayhurst. In this podcast, Robin will share his personal journey and experiences from his businesses and help you to learn from failure. You'll learn tips, tricks, and how to see things from a new perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robin Hayhurst.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bust and Beyond podcast. I'm very lucky to be here today with Hannah Cremona. She's a business strategy and mindset mentor. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, thank you, Robin, for having me.
Thank you for being here. So you've come from sunny Malta. So you're in sunny Malta at the moment. So we're now an international podcast, which is really good news for me. So you've got a story to tell. So let's start off by hearing a bit about who you are.
Yeah, fantastic. So my name is Hannah. I'm a business strategist. I'm currently in Malta. I've been living for the past 7+ years in Nepal, actually, in Kathmandu. A little bit about what I do. I work with solo entrepreneurs and small businesses to strategize their efforts and get their business in front of the right clients strategically and effectively. Yeah, so that they can build a sustainable and profitable long-term business. This, for me, is for the coaching and consulting space. I've been in this space for 2.5 years. And my previous background before that was in my family business, actually in Malta, where I started from a young age. I was one of those that just refused to go to university. Said, I'm done with the institutions and the academics and all of that stuff. I just want to grow and learn and enter the real world. So yeah, I started in my family business, which is predominantly a wholesale and distribution business in Malta, strong in the healthcare sector, so pharmaceuticals, from innovative pharma to the over-the-counter stuff. And over the 8-year period in the company, I, as you can imagine, went through various roles and tasks and responsibilities, and labels changed a few times, from in-field sales to logistics to branding. I also sat on the board a number of times for corporate branding initiatives, CSR and internal affairs, as well as being responsible for market access.
You say you work for your family's business. That's my background. I mean, I worked for my family's business after going out into the world before that. How did you find that? Because I know family businesses can be a challenge. It's kind of my expertise to try and help them nowadays. How did you find working for the family business? Because obviously you're not working there now.
No, I'm not. Well, there's a twist at the end of the story. I'm actually in the process of working on a project with them on a consultation basis, which is quite exciting. But let me just rewind to when I was 18 years old. Actually, I didn't want to join the family business so soon. It wasn't the plan at all. And I was working with a publication house at that time. I was an editorial assistant or coordinator of some sort. The entry-level sort of job that you get in a publication house. I actually overheard them talking about moving me into sales. And that's what sort of made me go running to my uncle, who was managing director at that time, and say, like, I'm really looking for a job. I know maybe it's too early for me to join in the family business, but I really see that there's a potential, and I really identified basically a brand that had been like dying. It was going to the pits and no one was really picking it up. No, I think they were just letting it have its own slow sort of death in the marketplace. Whilst my uncle kept on convincing me to take on a classical sales representative role, where you would go around the pharmacies and the channels, doing the orders, picking up orders and doing that kind of stuff. I kept on insisting on having this role, and eventually they gave in to my demands. Now, from there, what I felt was, over the years, had been sort of following my mom's footsteps. So this is my mom's side of the family. I later on started working very closely with her, and that became very difficult to be walking in your mom's footsteps. And that is when I started realizing that I was having an identity crisis. So on one hand, it was amazing because it gave me that opportunity to grow and to learn and to really like master many skills and experiences within that 8-year period. But at the same time, there was a lot of pressure on an emotional and personal level to sort of match up or follow up or take the next steps, take the reins and all of that stuff.
I think that can be a problem. I mean, the power of nepotism, hey, within businesses and how you can get on. But I mean, with my family company, I don't think there was a strategy about how it was going to kind of the next generation were going to take over and that kind of thing. And it just happened organically, which I don't think was a good thing. It wasn't planned out. And my brother, for instance, he didn't like the setup. He wasn't happy. He clashed with my father. I did exactly the opposite with my father. I absolutely agreed with him on everything. And he left. So family companies and challenges, the challenges of them are fantastic. But I think if you left of your own accord and you decided that you're going to go out elsewhere, that's a really clever thing to do. And when I'm working with companies now, I actually say to them, do you really want to be here when you talk about the second generation? Is this your passion? Is this what you want to do? They obviously all say yes to begin with. And then I repeat the question 3 or 4 times and you get the truth. But it's really important that people want to be there at that time. It's not saying they're not going to join again, but I think to kind of get out in the world and see how other companies operate is so important and so healthy for the business.
In fact, for us, in my case, it is 3rd generation. So this company was set up by my grandfather. The company just celebrated 70 years in operation. So we're 11 grandchildren on that end, and I'm on the younger end of that generation. So not all of us are there. In fact, a few of us are left actively working in the business. But what I can say is, I took a decision to move out because for many reasons. Number one, there was that pressure of whose footsteps am I following? So on a personal level, I had to take that decision to step out. And on a professional level to go and explore other industries and figure out more of who I am. So I'm talking about being in my late 20s. So this is not leaving in my 40s or 50s. It's maybe that to put it into context.
So you went to Nepal after working for the family business. So what were you doing there? It doesn't sound like you're driven by money.
I'm driven by money. I think I am, but it's impact. It's how I'm creating that money and what that money is actually meaning. Because for me, if I'm being rewarded with the financial aspect, it's because I have created an impact on some level.
Okay, so you go for the impact first and then the money comes in. So it's a bit like quality first, isn't it? You do something that's quality and then, I like that.
It's good that you bring that up, actually, because for me, even when I was working in the family business, it was not only about making the quick sale just to make the sales targets. For me, it's because perhaps I have a more strategic long-term vision of how things pan out. And for me, it was so important to build this network and to build these business relationships and other stakeholder relationships for the long term, right? And it was not so much about you buying my brand or you stocking my brand or you giving me the best shelf space in your outlet, but it was more about how can my brand's expertise, how can my expertise, how can my team's expertise support you as a business owner so that we can bring this quality, the brand, obviously I would believe in the brand as well, quality brand in front of your clients, and how is everyone going to win from this, right? Including the end consumer, of course.
So you just mentioned one of my core values, which is win-win. I'm a great believer that if you create a win-win scenario, you can repeat it. If you create a win-lose scenario, you can't. So win-win is so important and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of people overlook the sustainability factor.
We've kind of got an idea of you. You've had some problem with the business, and that's what we're here to talk about. How did that business come about? What did it do?
So fast forward a few years, I was in Kathmandu, settled, married, and all of that stuff. I had my own freelance business doing marketing, social media marketing, strategy, and other freelance bits and bobs for other companies, whilst also building my coaching business. And it was then when the pandemic hit, the classic, oh no, what am I going to do? But a lot of my freelance work just basically dwindled out. And there I was, sort of a shove in the backside to get my coaching business started. And it was in the midst of the lockdowns in Kathmandu, which was the strictest of lockdowns. It was prison. Literally, you won't be able to leave your house. When an old acquaintance of mine approached me with some sort of idea to service the frontline staff during the pandemic and during the lockdown. Okay, so we had access to a number of food manufacturers, like homemade sort of artisanal type food manufacturers, as well as chefs who were at home and ready to work, ready to do stuff. And so this is how the idea generated. Relatively low cost startup opportunity. From there, we started to develop the vision of promoting locally produced items, providing a platform for locally produced items, farmers' items, etc., to the marketplace every day of the week, and not only on the Saturday farmers market in a physical form, right? So this was the idea, and we started, and things quickly got out of hand.
That's a good one for me. There does have to be foundations. And actually, I do come across a lot of companies that grow organically too quickly. They haven't got a plan. They're not driving towards something. They're just growing. And what I see in them is that they get to a certain stage, they get overwhelmed. They can't keep up. They can't provide the service they'd like to provide or they need to provide. And they've got two options at that point. And one of two things happen. Either they shrink back down, if they can, to a copable level. And they might do that 3 or 4 times until they realize actually they need some help. They need some scalable systems, or they go bust. But it's one of the two normally, because they can't just implement systems overnight and be kind of ready to go. So it sounds like you were doing that.
To employ people with the idea that we're going to employ the people so that things can move more smoothly, except we went into like panic employing where we just hired the wrong people all the time. So the human resources wasn't there. There was a huge lack of understanding and difference. And this is the biggest problem in the leadership. So our partnership was basically, we were on completely different levels and ideas. We had completely different values. We had completely different ethics and way of working. Where I am, yes, I'm very strategic and visionary and whatever, but we need to have grounding. You need to have that infrastructure and support, right? So what I felt is that we were just not moving in sync, and you can't have, like, there was no leadership.
I think, Hannah, this has come up a few times on podcasts. So the 2 points really are structure. So the leadership comes from structure and people understanding their roles and accountability. But core values not being aligned is a big, big thing. And this goes back to core values. When I speak to my clients about it, they yawn, they go, yeah, okay. They don't understand that, companies fail by getting this wrong. So, Hannah, who was driving or who was driving the growth?
I would say, if I answer that question properly, that I don't want to be in a space where I'm putting like blame on people.
No, I'm asking about the growth. I'm not talking about the failure.
No, exactly. But both of us were driving the growth. The business was potentially working. There was so much potential in there. And this is another thing that went wrong. And I'm going to talk about that in a second when we come to learning the lessons from it. We were just driving growth in very different ways with very little communication.
Communication, big things again.
Again, like the communication breakdown, leadership breakdown. We had staff like headless chickens. It was just nothing to build on, really.
So at this exact time, if you can remember back, how are you feeling?
Energetically depleted, financially depleted.
Would burnt out be a kind of a good...
Constantly rolling into burnout, actually. It was a repeated burnout. It was chaos stressful, emotional. It caused problems in my private life, at home. It caused just chaos.
And did you find it kind of made you go back into yourself, or did you come out of yourself more, or how did you feel it affected you like that? And I see a lot of people that I call a head in the sand syndrome. They just want to kind of escape from what's happening around them.
Isolation. And for me, that's a familiar. Yeah, I think for me it was more that I would isolate. But there was pressure on myself that I put on myself because as I was trying to cope and handle and manage and navigate all of that chaos, I was also trying to build my coaching business. And so that just did not allow me to build. You can't operate. Your nervous system is in shock, is in complete, utter shock. And so, yes, head buried in the sand is a very familiar feeling, because I would isolate then from any other sort of anything else in life, really, because I didn't have the energy to do that and to show up for any of it.
Well, I think when you've got that amount of stress in your life, I think there's a saying that goes something like, where focus goes, energy flows. So the energy you do have, which, as you say, is depleted, is flowing into the problem and not into really a solution, which is a new company or whatever, the other thing is. And, they say, well, if you focus on that, that will happen. And everyone thinks it's some kind of karma kind of thing. It's just a realistic thing that if you do focus on that and don't run your own business and don't run your life properly, and that'll be the thing that fails, so you've got to be so careful in that.
100%. And for me, like that's we spoke about structure, but for me, the other part is also the leadership. You can have an amazing structure. You can have an amazing, or like the best systems and processes. You can have the best tech or the best whatever you need in your business. But if you don't have the right leadership, who's going to run it? How is it going to be run? Based on what?
Absolutely. In fact, I've got another guest coming on in the next few weeks. He feels that the problem he encountered was that he was not a leader. He was great at the ideas, but he couldn't manage and relate to people in the way they should do. So it is a very, very important thing, a very important skill, which is great. Okay, so you ended up, the business failed. What have you learned from that?
And I'd like to pick up on your last point, actually, because this has been a huge learning curve for my leadership. Huge learning curve for me. I mean, okay, let's just put the main and obvious lessons are: number one, be careful who you partner with.
Yeah, but so obviously be careful, but what would you say you should be looking for? So, we've already discussed core values being aligned, and there's trust.
Clear about what they're able to do and what they're accountable for. Spot on, because this was not there. This was not there. We kept talking about trusting each other, but believe me, trust is very quickly broken when there is money involved, when you're feeling depleted, when you're feeling like you're just not communicating, you're feeling like there's a communication breakdown. Even though you can communicate every day. You can talk to each other every day. But if what's happening behind the words is not matching the words, then there's a lack of trust. You're breaking the trust.
I've heard someone say, in the past, I made that decision because I know everyone trusted me to make that decision. That's not necessarily right. People might trust you to make a decision, but you should communicate with them first before you make the decision. You should have been allowed them to be part of the decision-making process. So people say, well, I'm trusted. We have trust. That's not trust. That is being a maverick and going off by yourself, making a decision in a partnership where that decision could be really, really important. So if you're not communicating and discussing it, it's not trust.
Spot on. So that's very clearly what happened in my situation. And I think one of the lessons is here to really ask yourself, why? Why am I getting into this partnership? Why am I getting into this business? Why this person or this business to partner up with, to merge with, to whatever, to do this project with, to move forward with? Why? What? Like, to really get into that inner clarity. Because if I had to really look back and answer those questions, I could see, going back to the previous point on my own leadership, okay, and really looking at my own responsibility here in making this decision to move forward with this person, I became very aware that my biggest strength is also my biggest weakness. My biggest strength is really to see the gifts and potential in people. And so on the flip side, that could mean also seeing the gifts and the potential in people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to improve or they want to do something or they want, that kind of really, that not even kind of, that really backfired.
I totally see that. And I think I'm guilty of the same thing, is that I see the good in people, I see their potential, but doesn't mean that they're actually going to fulfill it. But having said that, I personally wouldn't change that, because I think you just need some checks and balances in place. But to see that good in people and perhaps to give them the benefit of the doubt is a good thing. People will let you down all the time. People will let you down, but you can't mean that's a kind of going to change the way you see people and become cynical and, untrusting.
No, in fact, that is my biggest strength. That is what makes me successful in the coaching space, right? Because I'm able to guide and empower and consult in the right ways. The only difference is that person is willing to do that and coming into the space. So when you're looking at partnerships, for me, the question is really, why are you getting into this partnership, and having that inner clarity, and then following that up with the checks and the balances, the roles and responsibilities, super crystal clear. Who is moving, how you're moving, how are you keeping accountable, where are the accountability checks and measures, how is the communication, what systems in place do you need to maintain transparency?
Absolutely. And isn't it amazing how failure makes you such a better person? The only difference between failure and success is that you get up once more than you fall down. So one more time you get up than when you fall down. And I think you learn that, and you learn from failure because you will analyze it. You will say, I have been analyzing my failure in 2015. I still analyze it today. And I've come to conclusions, and, I always refer back to that. Now, because of that, there's loads of mistakes I will not make again. But success, you just go, oh, whoopee, I've got success. Don't necessarily know why. Some people will sit down and think, why am I successful? But they can't really put their finger on it. You have much more clarity in failure. So I think one guy, I remember when I first was looking for some consultant work after my company failed. He was a director of a company. And I said, well, in the flippant remark, I said, well, no one's going to want to work with me after my company's failed. And he went, no, exactly the opposite. Look what you've learned from that. Look how valuable you are now because of what you've gone through. And actually that one little phrase, one little chat he had changed my whole outlook. So I think failure is really important in life.
I think it's really important in life. Look, failure has a bad connotation based on the stories we attach to it at the end of the day. First of all, I believe that success is not really a destination.
Oh, you never get there. You never get there.
You never get there, really, because then there's the next thing, and then there's the next thing, and then there's the next thing. So for me, it's really about looking at it as these are all milestones as part of the journey. And so what is failure? If success are milestones along the journey, then what is failure? Like obstacles, challenges, lessons learned?
Think about horse racing and jumps. You kind of got to be aware there's other jumps beyond the one that you're about to face. But at the end of the day, if you don't get over the one in front of you, that doesn't matter. So they are obstacles. They're your obstacles. You don't want to fail those obstacles. But if you do fail and you do kind of fall off your horse, and you can come back next year and have another go.
And I think this is what sort of ate me alive in that process of what really kept on depleting me really was the fact that I didn't walk out when I was supposed to walk out. Because I was scared of failing, because I didn't want to fail, because I was fearful of what that would mean to my reputation. It wasn't that the business would fail. Like, I should have walked out when I was supposed to walk out. Less reputational damage, less heartache, less all of that stuff, right? But it's just that the stories I attached to having that failed business, inverted commas, sorry, you can't see me, I'm doing my inverted commas, was was that. The stories that I attached to it was the fear of being seen as a failure, of being rejected, of not making it, not proving myself.
That is a big thing. And I think sometimes you've got to know when to quit. Sometimes you've got to know that this is the time to back out. And it's a very, very difficult decision. It really is, because sometimes it's worth fighting for. So you don't want to give up too early. And often it's really worth getting someone impartial, someone who's not emotionally involved in the situation, to help you with that kind of part of the journey, because they can see it without the emotional bit of it. So if you were going to do it again, let's say you're going to do it again, what would you change? What lessons have you learned from it?
Look, if I had to do it again, first of all,
You might say you wouldn't do it.
I've said that before. So
You don't think the business model was good then?
I think that it needed a different business model. That business in particular had very low markups anyway. So the business model itself wasn't working, and this was always sort of, this was also part of the argument, right? Because we were trying to do things that could be more sustainable and profitable to be able to support that platform. So first of all, I would look at, again, really be crystal clear of why I'm getting into this partnership, do all the checks and balances, do not rush into making any decisions until like you are so secure in that partnership, because this is like a marriage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So really do your research. Do your research, is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Do your research, but really like do that inward check-in, and don't just go on the whims of this is exciting, this is fun, this is creative, this is, because that is all great and rosy. But when you think about marrying a person, you look at, okay, can I live with this person even when they're having their own shit show? Can I live with this person and hold this person when XYZ is happening, right?
Well, Hannah, with a 50% divorce rate at the moment, I don't think people do look at a marriage like that. I think they go, this is really exciting, let's get married. So it's very similar to starting a business, isn't it? No research, no thinking, well, what am I going to feel about, like this in 20 years' time?
The good, the bad, and the ugly, in sickness and in health, right? So really looking at that part and having the systems and processes in place to maintain the trust and relationship. Then, because this for me is one of the core sort of pillars of having a successful business, is your leadership, right? And your leadership is, whether it's you as a sole owner, or whether it's you and your partner or partners, whatever. But leadership is so important. Infrastructure, based on like, what are you growing the business on? Set the foundations, then look at growing the business. I see this happening a lot in the coaching and consultancy arena when they're looking at digital marketing, because they're looking constantly at growth and scaling tools to help their business, but they haven't set the foundations of actually establishing authority, having the visibility, gaining trust with their audience.
Or delivering what they're doing. I've seen that a few times. You've got to be able to actually give your clients what you're selling in a professional way. So yeah, I totally get that.
And then the other pillar is the income strategy. If you don't have an income strategy, you have no business, really, right? If you don't have profits, there's no way you can keep this sustainable. There's no way you can grow. There's no way you can scale. So then what's the scope?
Well, cash flow. Cash flow is so important, and companies generally, they don't go out of business through just not making a profit. They go out of business for literally running out of cash. So even if you're making a small profit, you might be you might be in some ways a successful company, but you run out of cash and you're gone. So cash flow and cash flow forecasting, people out there, if you do not run a cash flow forecast, and I suggest at least 6 months in the future, even if it's an absolute guess, then you're going to run into problems. So anything else? So if you were telling yourself now, just before you went into that, what was the 3 things that you would send a message back to yourself and say? Just 3 points that you'd say to perhaps avoid this. And one can be, don't do it.
Number 1, make sure that you stand strongly in your values, because the last thing you want to do is enter a business that's going to challenge those values. And the third would be, we're considering the first one as don't do it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll let you get away with that one. Yeah.
So stand true to your values. I think that's really important because that also helps you to establish healthy boundaries as well, with your partners when they need to be held, and have your checks and balances, and like we've been talking about, and that is both in terms of systems and procedures like the infrastructure, but also in terms of like a clear strategy, a clear plan of action to implement the vision on a logical level.
And I think, checks and balances are so important, and trust without checks and balances isn't trust. It's just abdication, really. So if you're in a partnership with someone or working closely with someone and you haven't got your checks and balances in place, and they say, well, don't you trust me? You've got a problem with the relationship, full stop. So, those checks and balances should be welcomed by both parties or all parties, and they should realise why they're there, because it's to protect each other. So that's really important. Well, Hannah, thank you ever so much for your time today. And it's so nice of you to join us from Malta. I'm quite jealous because it's a bit of a grey day here. It looks like it's sunny there. So no, it's been really good. Thank you for joining us, and it's been great having you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Bust and Beyond with Robin Hayhurst. Be sure to tune in next time and visit his website at robinhayhurst.com.